I found out my husband was cheating. Worse yet, the affair was with my sister. That moment shattered my world. The betrayal cut so deep it forced me to reevaluate everything: my marriage, my family, even my sense of self. I didn't just divorce him. I severed all ties with my toxic family, going completely no contact. For years, I lived apart from that chaos, rebuilding my life with deliberate peace. But as life often proves, some things don't stay buried, and eventually, the past found its way back to me. I've been married to my current husband Ryan, 32 years old, for 6 years now. Our relationship has been solid. We've weathered the storms most couples face: misunderstandings, disagreements, and a few rough patches here and there. But despite those bumps, we've cultivated a deep love and respect for each other. We laugh often, communicate openly, and genuinely enjoy each other's company. Or at least, that's what I thought, until about 8 months ago, when everything began to unravel. That's when Star, my younger sister, now 28, returned to her hometown. She had been living in Florida ever since she turned 18. Her life down there had always been a bit of a mystery, but the latest chapter was especially dramatic. Her long-term boyfriend, whom she'd been with for 5 years, abruptly ended their relationship and relocated to another city without so much as a proper goodbye. Star was left heartbroken, confused, and financially strained. The reasons she gave for their breakup were shocking. She claimed he had been unfaithful to her with other men. I didn't know the guy well, but that detail didn't sit right with me. I made a brief attempt to reach out to him, not to pry, but to get some closure or understanding, but found myself blocked. That was the end of that. Star moved back in with our parents, Gina and Jimmy, now in their mid-50s. During her first month home, she struggled to find work. Feeling sympathetic, I suggested that maybe Ryan could help. As a senior executive at his company, he had connections and influence. He made a few calls, and within a week, Star was hired into a position in his department. It was in her field too, which made the opportunity seem even more fortuitous. To understand the complexity, you need to know, Star and I were never close. We were raised under the same roof but living entirely different realities. She was the golden child, especially to our mother. My father? He always followed Mom's lead, spineless when it came to defending fairness. It wasn't blatant favoritism. It was death by 1,000 cuts. Like when we both turned 16, I got an old beat-up Dodge Neon that could barely get up hills. She got a nearly brand-new Mitsubishi Eclipse, sleek and sporty. The disparity only deepened as we aged. One time, when I was 17, I lost track of time with my boyfriend and came home 15 minutes past curfew. My parents took my car away for an entire month. The very next year, Star waltzed in, 2 hours late, reeking of weed, and received nothing more than a gentle lecture. I wasn't heartbroken when she left for college and decided to stay in Florida. Honestly, it was a relief. When she returned and started spending more time at our home, I took it as a possible olive branch. Maybe she was trying to mend things, build the bond we never had. At first, I welcomed it, but slowly, I began to sense something off. Star and Ryan grew increasingly comfortable with each other. They would engage in deep conversations, laugh at jokes I wasn't in on, and when I tried to join in, they'd wave me off with a casual, just a work thing. It became a pattern. When I expressed concern, Ryan reassured me it was all professional, that they just clicked because they were working on similar projects. What really raised alarms was how frequently Star started showing up at our house when I wasn't home. Ryan works a standard 8 to 4:30 job. I work later, from 10 to 7. More and more, I'd arrive home to find Star lounging on our couch or in the kitchen. Every time I asked why she was there, I'd get some vague excuse like, we had work stuff to catch up on. It happened so often that I began keeping mental notes. I told myself it was probably innocent, that I was being paranoid. But then came a moment I couldn't explain away. I have a morning routine. I always make the bed before leaving for work. Part of that ritual includes arranging the pillows a certain way, with the open ends of the pillowcases facing outward. It's a small detail, but something I do without fail. One day, after Star had been over and had dinner with us, I went to bed and noticed something was off. 2 of the pillows had their open ends facing inward. I asked Ryan if he'd been in bed during the day. He looked startled and said no. Why? He asked. I told him the bed wasn't the way I left it. He insisted I must have been mistaken. That night, I waited until he fell asleep, then checked his phone and laptop. There was nothing. No texts, no emails, no photos. Clean. But the emptiness was almost suspicious. They spent 40 hours a week together at work. If something were going on, they wouldn't need to leave a trail on their personal devices. 2 weeks ago, my parents invited us over for dinner. It was uneventful. until it wasn't. At one point, Ryan walked past Star in the kitchen. She casually reached out and grabbed his arm. He turned, and she leaned in to whisper something. Then they touched foreheads. It lasted maybe a second, but I saw it. Ryan stiffened and quickly walked away. Star smiled at me, smiled and turned back to chopping vegetables like nothing had happened. That moment broke something inside me. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was confirmation. Something inappropriate was happening. I couldn't lie to myself any longer. I had loved Ryan since I was 21. I believed we were building a future together. Now, that foundation felt like it was built on sand. Still, I wasn't ready to confront it head-on. I needed clarity. I needed space. I planned a weekend getaway to the city for just the two of us. A last-ditch effort to reconnect, to recapture the love that had defined our marriage. Deep down, I was terrified it was already too late. I was planning to confront him during the weekend getaway I had arranged, hoping I was wrong. Deep inside, I clung to the belief that maybe, just maybe, I had misread the situation. I didn't want it to be true. I didn't want to believe the man I married, the man I shared my dreams with, could betray me like this. Not with her. But the truth was already cracking through the surface, and it was about to flood my entire world. Update: you were all right. Every gut feeling, every red flag, I ignored them because I wanted so badly to believe in the life I had built. But that weekend destroyed everything. We left Friday afternoon for what I hoped would be a romantic escape. That night we laughed over dinner, shared drinks at a cozy bar, danced to a cover band like teenagers in love, and fell into bed together like nothing had changed. And nothing had changed. He was perfect. Too perfect. Saturday morning arrived and we were getting ready to explore the city. My chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. I couldn't pretend anymore. As he zipped up his jacket, I turned to him and asked, with no room to escape, "Are you having an affair with my sister?" He stopped mid-mouthmur, his mouth opened slightly and his eyes filled with tears. The silence between us was deafening. Finally, he whispered, "Yes." The world around me imploded. The air left my lungs as if I'd been punched. I couldn't even cry at first. Just stared at him in disbelief, my heart crumbling with every beat. I asked why. How could he do this? He shook his head, said he was sorry, said it wasn't supposed to happen, that they just clicked, that one moment became a kiss, that the kiss turned into more. I asked if he had brought her into our bed, into the place where we made love. He couldn't even speak. He just looked away, his shame louder than words. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just walked out, clutching my purse. I left him standing there in the hotel room and drove home alone, numb and silent. He arrived several hours later by Uber with my suitcase. He tried to talk, to apologize, but I didn't say a word. Tears streamed down my face as I walked past him. He packed a bag and left for a hotel that night. The silence in our home echoed like a ghost. The next morning, I went to my parents. They already knew. Of course they did. They offered weak apologies, but mentioned that Star had left the night before and might not be back for a few days. I didn't need to ask. I already knew where she was. With him. 3 months have passed since that weekend. Our divorce is nearing completion. Ryan moved out immediately and got his own apartment. Star moved in with him just days later. We speak only through attorneys now. Initially, Ryan told me I could keep the house and our savings. Guilt, no doubt. But within a few days, he changed his tune. He wanted to split everything. I know that voice in his ear wasn't his. It was hers. Fortunately, I had already secured our savings in a private account. There was no money to fight over. 9 years of my life gone in a flash. 9 years I will never get back. He has no idea what he's gotten himself into. Star is a manipulative narcissist who feeds on attention and power. She will use him. And when he's no longer shiny and useful, she'll discard him just like her ex. But even knowing that doesn't bring me peace. What truly gutted me was her cruelty. Just days after I learned the truth, Star tagged me on Facebook, a photo of her and Ryan kissing her cheek while she beamed. The caption, "Feeling loved." My stomach turned. I immediately deleted the app. I couldn't look at it, not for another second. About an hour later she texted me, "Sorry sis, didn't mean to tag you, no hard feelings. Hope we can still be close. You'll meet your soulmate someday, you too." That message was a slap in the face. I blocked her on everything, every phone number, every account, every email. She no longer exists to me. And my parents, they only made it worse. At first they pretended to care. When I told them I was cutting contact with Star and Ryan completely, My mother gave me a sorrowful look and said, "I'm sorry this happened. It shouldn't have happened this way, but your sister deserves to be happy too. You'll find someone, and we can all move past this." That broke me. I told her about the Facebook tag and the text Star sent. Her response, "Well, you shouldn't be on that stuff anyway." My father sat silent through it all. When I asked for his opinion, he simply muttered, "I agree with your mother," and walked away. That was the end for me. I went fully no contact with them too. The house is in escrow now. I'll be moving to a new state once it sells. I haven't told anyone where or when. No goodbyes, no forwarding address. Just a clean break. Only a few trusted friends and 2 cousins know where I'm going. As far as I'm concerned, my family no longer exists. Update. 4 years have passed since I last shared anything. Life has changed, dramatically. First, the good news. I'm engaged. Healing wasn't easy. It took months of therapy and personal growth. After I moved to Minnesota, I dipped a toe back into dating. My first date went okay. The second, a nightmare. That man was insufferable and arrogant, and I swore off men for good after that. But therapy helped me unpack the betrayal, the abandonment, and the pain I carried for so long. Slowly, I started finding myself again. Then came James. He's 37, and yes, he shares a name with my father. Ironic, I know. But James is everything my father and Ryan weren't. Thoughtful, grounded, respectful. He's a chef, and he co-owns a restaurant and bar with his twin brother, Jack. They're successful and kind-hearted. James treats me like I matter, like my presence is a gift, not a burden. I never imagined loving again, but here I am, excited for a future I didn't think was possible. But let's talk about the audacity my family had. Roughly 9 months after I left, I was still keeping strict no contact. No one knew where I had moved, only close friends and 2 cousins had my address. So imagine my shock when I opened my mailbox and found a wedding invitation from Ryan and Star. Tucked inside was a saccharine photo of them holding hands in a sunflower field, all fake smiles and forced sweetness. And if that wasn't enough, there was also a letter from my parents. A printed letter. It read, "You need to forgive and move forward. Let's put the past behind us. Family is forever." No, family is not forever, not when they stab you in the back and expect you to smile through it. That was the last time I ever saw their names in my mail. They don't exist in my world anymore. I've built something better. We all know things didn't go smoothly, but according to that letter from my parents, we're family, and families work through their problems. That's what they wrote, as if everything that had happened could be swept under a rug of nostalgia and forced forgiveness. They even claimed that Star wanted me to be a bridesmaid at her wedding, just as she had been for mine. I read it twice. The words blurred as disbelief took hold. What on earth made them think I would stand beside her, smile for photos, and pretend none of it had happened? That letter ripped open wounds I had spent years healing. All that trauma resurfaced, like it had just happened yesterday. My therapist and I had made real progress until that moment. But after reading it, I found myself sitting in her office more often, reprocessing pain that should have been long buried. These days I can laugh about it, at how tone-deaf and delusional it was. But back then, it felt like a betrayal all over again. I didn't write back. I didn't call. The only thing I did was quietly find out which extended family member had shared my address and cut them off entirely. That was a boundary violation I couldn't forgive. Once that cord was cut, I felt lighter, safer. But it wasn't the end. Just last week, Ryan of all people showed up at my apartment. James and I don't live together yet, though we're preparing for that step soon. So I was alone when Ryan came knocking. He looked almost too put together, like he'd spent extra time grooming himself for this moment. I opened the door and stared at him, heart racing, though not from affection. "What do you want?" I asked, coldly. "I just want to talk," he said. "I'm so sorry for everything. Star and I, we're getting divorced. I found out she was unfaithful throughout most of the marriage. I don't expect you to forgive me or take me back. I just think we should talk, maybe get closure. For both of us." I blinked, twice. Was he serious? I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No. I give you no closure. You made your choices. Did you really believe the same woman who's had more visitors than the Holiday Inn would magically settle down just because you put a ring on her finger? You're an even bigger fool than I thought. I forgive nothing. I want nothing. I am better off now, and that will always be the case. You can go to hell." Without waiting for a reply, I shut the door in his face and locked it. I immediately called my landlady. She's a sweet older woman who's become something of a surrogate grandmother to me over the past few years. I told her Ryan was at my door. Within 10 minutes, her two nephews, who handle maintenance for the apartment complex, showed up. They firmly told Ryan he was trespassing and not welcome. If he ever came back, they said, the police would be involved. He left without another word. But of course, that wasn't the end. The following evening, I went to James's restaurant. It's where I spend most weeknights when he's managing. Just enjoying the warm environment, sharing quiet moments during his breaks, and catching up with the incredible staff who've become like family to me. That night was a quiet Tuesday. I sat at my usual corner table, sipping my drink, until I looked up and saw Ryan walking in. He didn't hesitate. He walked right over and sat down across from me. James noticed instantly. He came over in seconds. "You want me to kick him out?" he asked, eyeing Ryan with controlled anger. "Not yet," I said calmly. "I've got a couple of questions." Ryan looked smug, as if that meant he was making progress. How clueless could he be? "Tell me," I said. "What happened between you and Star?" There was no kindness in my voice. I wasn't there to comfort him. It was morbid curiosity, nothing more. He sighed dramatically and said, "She was cheating on me. At least 2 married men, maybe more. I didn't know for the longest time, but eventually everything came out." I rolled my eyes. "She's a repeat offender. What did you expect?" He tried to justify it. Said he stuck it out for another year so he could protect his finances. Sold assets. His savings. "In the end, she barely got anything," he added smugly. I tilted my head. "And where is she now?" He looked embarrassed. "She moved back in with your parents." That was the answer I'd been waiting for. "Good," I said. "That's all I needed. You can leave now." James crossed his arms. "You heard her. Out." Ryan tried to protest. "Wait, I cut him off. No forgiveness, no closure. I just wanted to hear that my selfish, narcissistic sister is back, living under my mother's thumb. That's enough for me." James stood tall and pointed to the exit. The bartender and 2 servers stood behind him, arms crossed, expressions icy. Ryan hesitated, then finally turned and walked out, muttering under his breath. As he neared the door, James added, "And if you ever come back—" Yeah, I know. Cops. Trespassing," Ryan snapped. After he was gone, nearly everyone in the restaurant came to check on me. It was touching and a little overwhelming. Later that evening, James's family called and insisted I stay with him for a few days just in case. Their care, their protectiveness. It melted something in me. I'd never experienced love like that, not even from the people who were supposed to love me. That night, curled beside James in bed, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. Update. I didn't expect to have another update, but here it is. And it's a good one. I'm now 41 years old, and I'm a mother of 2 beautiful boys. My oldest is 6, my youngest just turned 2. James and I are still madly in love, still growing, still building the life we dreamed of. I now work part-time as an office manager for the restaurants. 3 years ago, one of James's cousins bought into the business and we opened a second location. It's been a whirlwind. Between the 2 spots, the team has stayed tight-knit and committed, which allows James, Jack, and their cousin some much-needed family time. What we've built together is more than just a business. It's a family legacy, a place where people feel welcome and safe. Our staff includes cousins, siblings, and close friends. It's like a home with open doors. On weekends, we gather for staff brunches. On holidays, we celebrate as one big, extended family. It's the kind of love I never had growing up. Of course, parenting has its tough days. Running a business isn't always smooth. But the life I live now, the love I come home to, the arms that hold me when I'm tired, the little voices calling me mommy, it's everything I ever hoped for and more. The past? It's a shadow behind me. It used to haunt me. Now, it's just a faint outline, barely worth glancing at. And as for Ryan, Star, and the people who failed me, they're ghosts. My story didn't end with their betrayal. It began with my healing. I am free, I am whole, and I am finally truly happy. It wasn't exactly ideal, but when I think back to that stretch of time after Ryan came back into the picture, it's pretty clear that's when I got pregnant. James had insisted I stay with him after everything blew up again. His parents insisted too, in fact. They were so adamant about protecting me, about making sure I was never alone. Looking back, it all feels a little surreal. They now joked that it was all part of their master plan, that they'd always wanted to be grandparents, and the timing was just divine. I can't even be mad about it. It was one of the happiest surprises of my life. Now, let me bring you up to speed on the latest development. After Ryan managed to track me down and show up uninvited, I assumed it was only a matter of time before my parents or Star made an appearance. I stayed vigilant, especially for the next few weeks, but surprisingly, nothing happened. No messages, no emails, no calls. It was quiet. Time passed, my guard slowly lowered. I started feeling more confident in my boundaries and more protected within the support system I had built. Eventually, I rejoined social media. Cautiously, of course. I stayed completely no contact with my parents, Star, and most of my extended family. But I wasn't delusional. If they really wanted to find me, they probably could. It wasn't like I was in hiding anymore. I was just trying to live my life. It wasn't until after the birth of our first son that I heard from my mother again. Out of nowhere, a message landed in my inbox. Her tone was exactly what you'd expect. Passive, evasive, lacking any real remorse. She gave a watered-down apology, said something about forgiveness, and then asked about her grandson. That last part lit a fire in me. The audacity to claim any kind of connection to my child after what she had allowed, after what she defended, was outrageous. I didn't just block her, I responded. You do not have any grandchildren. I am not your daughter. Therefore, my children are not related to you. If you're looking for grandchildren, maybe you should tell Star to get out there and do what she does best. And then I blocked her. She tried again with new accounts, but I blocked every one. I didn't engage. I didn't even read most of the messages. I was done. Or so I thought. Recently, I started getting hit with a new wave of messages. Dozens of them. From my parents, from unknown numbers, from fake accounts. They were dramatic, begging to be part of the kids' lives, emotional pleas filled with phrases like, make amends, and family deserves a second chance. I ignored them all. Then something unexpected happened. Star started reaching out. At first, her messages were short and vague. Please talk to me. I need to speak with you. No apologies, no explanations. Just those same hollow requests, over and over. For 3 weeks, I stayed strong, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to a Zoom call, just me. No kids. The call opened with awkward small talk and subtle, repeated attempts to ask about the children. I shut that down immediately. They already have grandparents, I said plainly. James's mom, dad, and grandmother. That's enough. Star looked awful. She was pale and thin, her eyes sunken. My parents didn't look much better. Tired, older, weary in a way that almost made me feel sorry for them. Almost. They started apologizing. Star said she was sorry for what she had done, that she missed having a sister, and that she knew she had ruined everything. She said she wished she could go back and change things. My mother, never one to waste an opportunity for dramatics, jumped in with her usual monologue about family and forgiveness and supporting each other through everything. I just sat there, silent. When they finished, I said, "Is that it? Because if it is, I'm going to hang up." That's when they panicked and shouted, "Wait!" And the truth finally came out. Star was sick, her kidneys were failing. She'd been dealing with this for a couple of years, and now she was out of time. She needed a transplant, and they were hoping I'd be a match. A family member was her best shot. I was their best shot. I let the silence hang for a few seconds, then asked, "So this is what this is really about? You want my kidney?" My mother immediately began to cry. "Please, don't do this. I know we've made mistakes, but she's dying. You're her sister. Can't we just come together for this one thing?" I stared at her through the screen. "You took my marriage? Now you want my body too?" My father, usually silent, spoke up. "We're sorry, truly, but we're also in trouble. Her medical bills are overwhelming. Your mother and I are aging, and we can't keep up. We're about to lose the house. We need help." "So you want my kidney and my money?" I asked. "Don't put it that way," he said, looking ashamed. Star chimed in, her voice cracking. "Please, just come home. I need my sister. I don't want to die. Just see if you're a match. If not, we'll never contact you again." I told them I needed time to think. That night I sat down with James. I told him everything. He didn't flinch. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I support you 100%. Then he added, "Do you want us to go with you?" I shook my head. "No, I need to do this on my own." I messaged my family the next morning and told them I'd get tested here in Minnesota. If I were a match, we'd go from there. A week later, the results came in. I was a perfect match. I agreed to come back to Missouri. By the time I arrived in St. Charles, Star's condition had worsened. She had been admitted to the hospital, too ill for any meetups or emotional reconciliations. And honestly, that was fine by me. There was nothing more to say anyway. I stayed in a modest hotel near the hospital. I didn't tell them where I was staying, didn't invite them to visit me. I was there for one purpose, the tests. The transplant coordinator was kind and professional, and after running additional panels, confirmed that yes, I was not just a match, but an excellent one. Physically, I could proceed. But emotionally, that was a whole different battlefield. Lying awake that first night in the hotel, I kept replaying everything, the years of silence, the betrayal, the smug looks from Star when she had what I'd built, the way my mother had twisted the knife every time I tried to express hurt, the way my father stood by doing nothing. And now, the desperation. They weren't reaching out because they missed me. They weren't apologizing because they'd changed. They needed something. My kidney. My savings. A savior. And they had the nerve to ask it of the person they had once discarded like trash. Still, I felt that pull of decency, of obligation, not for them, but for the person I'd become, a person I'm proud of. The next morning, I visited Star's hospital room. She was frail and hooked up to machines. She looked genuinely surprised to see me. She whispered, "Thank you for coming." I nodded but said nothing. Our conversation was brief. I didn't hold her hand. I didn't cry. I simply told her I was a match, and I'd agree to the transplant under strict legal conditions. No further contact. Ever. No calls, no letters, no future appeals. I would save her life, but not welcome her back into mine. She cried. My parents protested. I stayed firm. The surgery is scheduled for next month. I'm doing this for my peace, not theirs. I want to close this chapter for good, not out of love or forgiveness, but because I refuse to carry this bitterness for the rest of my life. I want it done. Over. And when it's over, I will fly back to Minnesota, back to my family, my real family, and never look back. This is the final gift I will ever give them. After that, there'll be nothing but a story I once lived through, a storm I survived. As I had absolutely no intention of doing anything remotely social with these people, especially since every time they found a spare minute, my parents took it upon themselves to ask if I had thought about helping them climb out of their ever-worsening financial pit. I kept my visits strictly medical. I wasn't there for family bonding, and I made that very clear from the start. Their subtle guilt trips and not-so-subtle requests for money fell on deaf ears. They might have gotten Star stabilized for the moment, but their desperation was leaking through every word and sideways glance. Eventually, it came time for the formal consultation with the transplant specialists. I arrived alone. The team of doctors greeted me politely and began laying out every detail, what the transplant would entail, the tests I'd need, the risks I'd face, and the recovery process. I sat there, nodding along, absorbing everything. When they paused to ask if I had any questions, I said, "Yes, I'd like to have this conversation with everyone present. Let's bring my family in." We all reconvened in Star's hospital room. She was sitting up, visibly weak, pale, but alert. My parents were there already, flanking her as usual, guarding her like royalty. They looked up when I entered, their eyes flickering with hope, maybe even relief. They had no idea what was coming. The doctor took charge of the conversation. Star's kidney failure is progressing. Without a transplant, her prognosis is 6 months, maybe less. But there's good news. We've run the match data, and we've never seen compatibility like this, a near-perfect genetic fit. The odds of finding another match like this outside of her immediate family are nearly non-existent. He went on about the benefits of acting quickly, how Star's chances would improve drastically with early intervention, how it was all aligning perfectly, except for the decision. Everyone turned to me, silently urging me to say yes. I slowly walked over to Star's bed. I reached out and gently took her hand. Her eyes met mine, large, brown, searching, maybe even hopeful. I held her gaze and smiled faintly. "Did you hear that, Star? I'm a perfect match. I'm probably the only person on this planet who can save you." She nodded slightly, her lips trembling, tears pooling in her eyes. "And I'm not going to." Silence. Dense, suffocating silence. I didn't let go of her hand. I leaned closer and spoke softly but clearly. "You are the most selfish, manipulative, narcissistic person I have ever known. I didn't come here to help you. I came so you'd understand that the only person capable of saving your life is the one person you stabbed in the back, and now you're paying the price for it, with your life." She broke. Loud, uncontrollable sobs. My parents turned to me, furious, voices rising. I turned to them and said, "Save it. Don't even try. And don't ever ask me for anything again. The only money I'll spend on either of you is for cremation, on the condition that your ashes are handed to me so I can flush them down the filthiest gas station toilet I can find." The medical staff stood frozen in shock. I walked out and didn't look back. Now I'm home, my real home, surrounded by the only family that ever truly loved me, and I have never felt more at peace.